On the Pen live for this Monday. What is the date today, Hambone? 23rd, the 23rd of March.
Yeah.
It's a perfect start to this episode because we're just getting back into it. I took the week off generally last week. You took the week off, but there was a ton of news. We're not going to get into all of it today because the podcast is tomorrow. But one of the main topics I wanted to talk to you about was the fact that India launched $14 Ozempic, or $14 semaglutide generics, which I think gives us a little bit of window into just how much the stuff actually costs to make in reality. If they can be profitable in India at $14 a month, just how cheap this stuff is actually to manufacture. So we're going to get into that, but we're going to save some of our favorite topics like Reddit Who Tried, Reddit True Tide for the podcast tomorrow. And generally, we're just going to get caught back up with each other because I also had some crazy things happen with my own personal journey over the last few days that I wanted to give you a little update on as well. So welcome in. I would love to say hello to all of you as you're entering in today. I know that I saw J-Neb in there. Let's see here. I lost my my screen here. I know I saw J-Neb, so welcome. I'm sure we probably have Sue the Dude in the house. If you are new here, drop an N in the chat. We would love to welcome you by name into the stream today. And so let's see here. Ruben's in the house. Chalk it ups here from sunny Florida. Yeah, we're in Iowa where last week we got another round of snow. And so we're just eagerly awaiting the spring here.
One 180-degree day, which is par for Iowa.
Yeah, and 180-degree day.
Now we're back to coats.
It is the bipolar weather capital of the world, I feel like. So but let's get into some of the weird stuff that's happening on my personal journey. Then we'll get into the Ozempic story, and then I know you've got some stuff to talk about too. So Issaquah, Washington, welcome. Oh, Debbie's in the house. Nancy, Chi-Chi's in the house. Good to see you all. Ray, good morning. Good to have you live with us today on this Monday, March 23rd. We are getting close. We're getting close to the end of the Lent season. Now, a couple of weeks ago, now a full month ago, I told you I was going off of a GLP-1 during the period of Lent. I don't want to say for Lent because it kind of implies that I was giving it up for the Lord. That really wasn't what was going on here, although I did feel a calling to that I was supposed to do this. And at the same time, I kind of introduced a lot of things at once, right? So I went off a GLP-1. I've been off now for just over 30 days. I think it was February 18th, February 17th, maybe was the last day that I took a Wegovy pill. I had been on that for a month. And then prior to that, I had about a 2-week period where I wasn't on anything. And then before that, I had ended Mounjaro. And so it's been about December since I've had tirzepatide. And it's been about 30 days since I've had any GLP-1. And on the blood sugar side, it was going really well. And my blood sugars were averaging about 125. Now, that's a little bit on the high end, but pre-diabetic numbers. So not terrible for somebody who wasn't actively treating their diabetes with medication. And I want to talk about something kind of crazy that happened. So we had last week was spring break, and it was really fun. We took the kids to a place called Great Wolf Lodge. If you've ever been there, it's a parent's nightmare and it's a child's dream. They've got, a big indoor water park, which is fun in the Midwest when you've been cooped up all winter. You get a chance to do water slides and all that stuff. So the kids loved it. I had taken my CGM off before we left, and I didn't have a replacement one to put on. So a CGM, for those of you who don't know, it's called a continuous glucose monitor. It's something that the Lord's cheaps. It's something that you put on your arm that feeds your average glucose to your phone. And so you can always see, as a type 2 diabetic, Spoonie Magumi's in the house. Spoonie, welcome back. It's good to see you. And so it's going to tell you in real time and keep track of the data about what your blood sugars are doing. And like I said, for the last 3 weeks, it'd been 125 average. So it would dip down to the hundreds and then, dip up towards maybe 180 when I would eat. So like manageable, right? And so I was actually pretty encouraged by that because I wasn't eating like super low carb or anything. I was actually fueling for these workouts, which I also started around a month ago. Now I've been working out in the gym off and on, but not like intensely for several months now. But starting about 3 weeks ago, I started a really intense workout regimen with my friend Ike, who happens to be an NFL football player, and he's got a kind of off-season workout regimen that he goes through, which is we do it 4 days a week. One day of a week I'm on my own for this, and then the 3 days I'm working with him. And the 3 days that we're working together, we're doing this for a solid 2 hours. And so it's a combination of kind of circuit training, weightlifting, cardio, high intensity interval training. And so we're doing all of this again 4 days a week, and that started 3 weeks ago. I also started 3 weeks ago testosterone replacement therapy. So there's a lot of changes all at once. And so I've been, I probably would be better again if I were incremental about the things that I added so I can see what's going on and what affects what. But this is just what we chose to do. So I told you how my weight's been creeping up when this has been crazy because I have been tracking meticulously for the last 3 weeks what I put in my body. And so I try to keep my calories under 2,500 calories a day. And, that's going to be average for about a 250-pound male, right? And I'm heavier than that. So that's a deficit for me. And then also I have these workouts where I'm working out and burning anywhere from 500 to 1,000 calories easily during these workouts. So not only am I in a deficit, but I'm adding to that deficit by this training. And are there any guesses as to what my weight has done in this time? Because if all you're tracking is your weight, and that really has been all that I'm tracking, and admittedly, it's the wrong metric to track when you are in an active muscle building kind of phase and you're taking testosterone replacement therapy, like that's going to have an impact. But does anybody want to take a stab? So on February 18th, my weight was 281 pounds, 281 pounds. Now that was up over the previous month a little bit, and definitely up since the fall, which was my lowest in 10 years. I was down to 266, if you can believe that, 266. And so 281 was my weight when I went off of the GLP-1 completely for Lent. There you can kind of see my apple, and I guess I'm kind of giving away the trend there too. But any guesses at where the weight sits this morning? Because believe it or not, the scale is now up 15 pounds, 15 pounds in just 1 month, completely off of the GLP-1. And again, this is with a pretty reasonable caloric deficit. If you want to know the macros on this, I hate sharing this because this is where everybody shares their opinion. I just want to cut you off at the pass. I don't care what your opinion is. Go ahead and put it in the comments. But I really don't care. I can't care about it because so many opinions out there are conflicting. Like, you need to eat more protein. And then as soon as somebody says you need to eat more protein, the other person says protein spikes your insulin, you'll never lose weight. Or somebody says you need to do more cardio, and the other person says, well, cardio spikes your cortisol, you'll never lose weight. It could go on and on and on. You need to eat more fat. Well, fat is really calorically dense. Like, there's always an argument pro and against whatever. At the end of the day, you want to expend more energy than you use, and that's ultimately the key to weight loss. Then you take in, and then ultimately, like right now, I am. Jennifer Nebraska wants to know how much water I swallowed at the pool. If it's all water, it could be a little bit of that.
Water.
Becky says she's not guessing. It's not your beeswax. Well, God bless you, Becky. Okay, well, it's 296 is the weight today. Like, we're creeping up to 300 pounds again, which is insane thought for me. But I want to zoom out just because I think that is kind of like the headline, right? It's up 15 pounds after being off of GLP-1. But I want to underscore the things that we're doing here, right? We're building muscle, certainly not 15 pounds of muscle, but like, I feel stronger. I mean, I don't know how to explain it, but I feel stronger. My energy level is better. Like, I'm starting to see definition in my legs that I wasn't seeing before. I'll I'll catch a shadow in the mirror and I'll be like, what is that? And so I do know that muscle is coming on. I know that there's water retention, and I was definitely warned when you go on TRT, the scale is going to go up. So I'm thinking that I may need to invest in I use the Shape scale, because the Shape scale is really what helps me, I feel like, manage obesity and stay accountable to the scale. But in this season where I'm trying to trying to lay this foundation of gaining muscle and getting stronger, that I need to like focus on something more that tracks my body composition.
Yeah.
How much
Yeah.
lean mass that you have, and how much bone density you have, and how much water you're carrying.
Yeah.
I feel like though that is probably something that I should maybe switch to in the interim, but I still do love the Shape scale, because I hate that number. I mean, I hate the fact that, regardless of what's happening physiologically to me, like as good as the benefits could possibly be, I just want the stinking scale to be lower. I just really do. And so anyways, that's the update. Now, this is the crazy thing that's happened. All right. And we talk about the half-life of these drugs. So if you stop taking a medication, you still have the drug working its way through your system. And the half-life of semaglutide is 7 days. And that's what I was on for the month that I was on it. And so when you take the medication, and we're going to have a very interesting interview on this later this week about, your blood plasma concentration of the medication in your blood, and how it would be better to track how much medication is in your system than the dose that you're on, in terms of optimizing treatment and support for a patient on GLP-1s. But honestly, like a lot of different medications, but specifically with GLP-1s, the 7-day half-life. So for a long time, I thought the half-life of a drug just meant it's, after the half-life is over, you've got half the drug in your system, and then by another half-life, it's gone. Well, that's not actually the case. So the half-life, you have many half-lives of a drug, because it's how long it takes your body to clear 50% of the drug that's in your system. So there, with semaglutide, it's 7 days and it's half gone. And then another 7 days, half of that is gone. And another 7 days, half of that is gone. And so really, we're talking many weeks until the drug is completely like untraceable in your system. So when you talk about the half-life, it's important to understand that distinction, that there are many half-lives of a drug, because it's how many days it takes your body to expel 50% of what's in your system. And so really, after that 1 month, I started to kind of reach that point where there was no more medication helping me at all. So I'd cleared all the Manjaro out of my system long ago, weeks ago, months ago at this point. But the semaglutide only recently. Guys, I had the craziest thing happen with my blood sugar. I know a lot of people, you're going to say, this isn't crazy, this is to be expected. Well, fine. You're smarter than everyone if you put that in the comments. But this is what's crazy. My blood sugars. So I talked about how I had to take off the CGM before our vacation. So when I came back from vacation, I had a CGM, that had come in the mail. So I put that on.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you guys, my blood sugars are out of control, like so out of control that I'm considering maybe not waiting until the end of Lent to reintroduce a GLP again. Check this out. So my average blood sugars had been 125. I would say maybe in the last 2 years, 3 years, let's just say my time on a GLP-1, the times that my blood sugars that I've eaten and my blood sugars have gone over 200, I could count on one hand, maybe just a couple fingers. Like it happened a couple times. My blood sugars rarely, if ever, went over 200. And usually if it went over 200, I did a finger stick to kind of true up, because you can do that. Like your CGM might say something, but it might be a little bit off your actual blood sugar. And so when I've done that, it's been below 200, like 188 or 192 or something. So I put the CGM on when we get back from vacation. And mind you, I didn't eat like an idiot as a diabetic. It's not like I was eating, I think I maybe had a couple bites of dessert one night, which is pretty rare for me to ever do that. My blood sugars upon waking every day this week have been over 200.
Whoa.
Upon waking. So you have this thing called the dawn phenomenon. If you're not diabetic, you're gonna be like, why would your blood sugars rise in the morning? Well, there's something called the dawn phenomenon. Essentially, as your body prepares to wake, there's a release of cortisol, and in response to that, sort of hormonal release, your liver starts to create glucose.
Okay.
And a lot of people don't know this about your liver, but your liver actually makes sugar. So when you're diabetic, oftentimes your liver is overproducing sugar, and it's producing it in overdrive. And so this was actually kind of terrifying for me, because this is like a new level of diabetes for me.
Yeah.
I have never woken up with 200 sugars.
Yeah.
And so, like, even now, I had a 2-hour intense workout today. A 2-hour intense workout today. My blood sugars are at 141 right now. All I've had this morning was a couple of strips of bacon and a protein shake before my workout. And that's all I've had today. And the protein shake didn't have sugar in it. My sugars are at 141. And so this is terrifying for me as a diabetic, because when you get these blood sugars over, like 180, and they're sustained there, you're doing damage to your body.
Yeah.
And that's like what they really get concerned about with type 2 diabetes, is managing that glucose and keeping it low. So I have a couple of options right now. I could go on metformin, because I think what's happening is my liver is going into overdrive, producing glycogen, and it's raising my blood sugars. So metformin, one of the mechanisms of action of metformin, actually the primary mechanism of it, is to inhibit that glucogenesis in your liver.
Okay.
But GLP-1s do that too. And so that's why a lot of people who are diabetic, when they talk about weight loss, actually end up doing better when they combine it with metformin, because they're getting like two drugs that are kind of inhibiting that release of glucose from the liver.
Specifically GLP-1s do that?
GLP-1s and GIP both.
Okay.
In the class of nutrient stimulated hormones typically help to inhibit that production of glucose by the liver. And so when you're taking metformin on top of a GLP-1, you're kind of getting two drugs that are targeting the same thing. And some people, they have to worry about almost like too low of blood sugars, right?
Okay.
But for those who are diabetic, so I could just add in metformin. It just depends on how dogmatic I want to be about being off a GLP-1 for the entire period of Lent. Again, this is like kind of like a reset. There was a mental health element to this to me, which I feel great. I feel 100% better than I did a month ago, 2 months ago. But the sugars are kind of scary. George said, would a 30-minute walk lower your sugar? Well, the thing is, I just worked out for 2 hours. And part of that was, probably 30 minutes of it was on the treadmill. And that took me from, let's see what I woke up this morning. I woke up, looks like I was about 190, 188. And the workout took me down to, I'm sitting at 139 at this moment. And that's a 2-hour workout. So Ruben's off to the dentist. Thanks for hanging out with us, Ruben. Appreciate it. It's good to be back with you all. And I appreciate you stopping in and spending some time with us. So weight is up. I think we can explain why. I don't think that that's adiposity. I don't think that that's 15 pounds of fat that I've added on. Although if it continues to go in that direction, I will start to wonder. And I think I do need to get some sort of like DEXA scan type scale to kind of bring me back to earth on this. Bless you. And so the weight is kind of a neutral for me right now. I'm not super concerned about it. I'm annoyed by it.
Yeah.
The blood sugars are something entirely different. That's a little scary to me. Yeah. So,
well, and maybe your intuition to go off for Lent was just about that half-life situation, and you've reached the point where you feel like you finally surpassed all of the half-lives, and you can fully realize that reset.
Yeah, it was a complete washout. Now, one of the things that folks do talk about, and I do wonder, actually, now that I've washed out for 30 days, I wonder, I'm going to go back and look at some of the clinical trials for some of the new drugs, because I was excluded from some of those clinical trials because I was actively on a GLP-1.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
But if you don't have enough time to do a washout period, and I don't know, 60 days, 90 days, whatever the test, the trial determines, if you're not within that window, then you're not going to qualify. So maybe I'll go back and check and see if there's another study that I might qualify for. So maybe
that also makes me wonder if people are in the studies that are not being truthful about having had enough wash period. That's very interesting.
Yeah.
Hopefully not. Hopefully people are being honest.
Yeah,
but
you do wonder. And that actually brings up a really interesting story that's been circling around online for the last couple of days. So one of the things that I saw pop up in the mainstream media, maybe you can find this article for me. So there's been several articles about how obesity trials are struggling right now to enroll patients or keep people enrolled in the trials because of people getting placebo. And people understand at this point, it's pretty well documented that there's other drugs. Like, why waste your life for a year and a half on a placebo drug, not treating your medication or not treating your disease, when there's medications out there that you could get on and get help. And so there's articles right now about how these drug companies are struggling to maintain the placebo arms of their placebo controlled studies because people don't want to stay on a placebo for 2 years. And this is something that we flagged maybe a year ago here at On the Pen. Like, I don't think that it's defensible at this day and age to even run placebo controlled trials in nutrient stimulated hormone obesity trials, because there is a comparator, right? You could just run it against semaglutide. At least for that trial period, somebody gets on semaglutide and they're getting some sort of treatment, and then you compare its efficacy to semaglutide. All we've been talking about in terms of this topic is just like, this just isn't fair to people. But what might actually force some change here is that they're spending a lot of money on these trials. And if people just plumb aren't going to stay in them when they realize that they're on placebo, they're going to have to change something to save money. So sometimes that's just what it comes down to. When it comes, a lot of
time lost.
Right.
There's a lot of articles. There's a Bloomberg obesity drug test upended by placebo patients leaving. New York Post.
Yeah, New York Post and Bloomberg. Okay, so multiple, and perhaps they caught on to something that we've been sharing here for a while too, but maybe the drug companies are starting to complain about it. But yeah, you
it's all in the last 4 days.
Yeah, this is all come up kind of over the weekend is when I saw it. So it really needs to be addressed, because people shouldn't be on placebo for these medications. It's National Chip and Dip Day, and my workplace is on fire with a chip dip potluck. Really thankful for my turds on days like this. I can try some without overdoing it and regretting it. That's awesome.
That must have been why somebody was saying the Lord's cheaps.
These are the Lord's cheaps. That and Nacho Libre is it's a huge hit in our house. Our kids love Nacho. I would try 1 milligram of tirzepatide and a brisk morning walk. Microdosing thoughts, George. So I'm so glad that you brought that up, because I am starting to become a believer in the microdose aspect of these medications, because I think that these clinical trials are designed to get people to really high doses, but I think some people may respond at lower doses. That may not be me, but I do intend on starting low and slow this time around, because I want to find what is that level that controls my blood sugar, what is that level that helps deal with satiety to some extent. But I already know tirzepatide at any dose is not going to shut off the desire to eat, the hunger. It just doesn't work that way for me. So at what dose does tirzepatide actually control my blood sugar? Am I getting benefits and not having some mental trade-off of like, I don't enjoy anything. I'm feeling depressed or down in the dumps or whatever. So that's really what I'm hoping to do is actually to do maybe sort of like a microdose situation where I'm not jumping in at the super high doses. So that is something that I'm going to work on when I do reintroduce these. It's National Sue puts his finger in the dip day. Choose your dip accordingly. I just had Aldi Southwest guacamole and tortilla chips for lunch and a protein shake. Awesome. I have the Renpho Ace electrode scale and it's matching up with the DEXA I've done, but Hume is supposed to be outstanding. I've heard good things. I think you use that one, right?
Actually, yeah, I did get the Hume scale like about a month or two ago.
Yeah, I might have to check that one out. Shonda's been on 2.5 the whole time. I also have the Renpho scale. I love it. I love the idea of focusing on body recomposition. Now, I have a Renpho scale too. I just never felt like it was that accurate, but I probably have like a cheap one. So I need to probably spend a little bit.
Yeah, and I really have no barometer for knowing how accurate my Hume scale is because I've
Never had a
been
DEXA.
Well, and I've never really even been much of a scale person either. So
Sure. Ray loves his Renpho scale. Kelly said it needs to be the scale with the handles. Yeah, I definitely don't have that one. Huel, strawberry, banana, and some watermelon here. Good. Everybody's sharing what they're eating today. Microdose for sure. 3 milligrams twice a week is controlling my food noise. So yeah, I wouldn't call that microdosing. I'd call that split dosing because 6 milligrams weekly is more than the standard dose of 5 milligrams, which is the first therapeutic dose. So just a technical point that I would make, I would call that a split dose. But yeah, certainly two smaller doses. There's a lot of people doing that. It helps people to not like the half-life of tirzepatide that we talk about is actually 5 days instead of 7 days like semaglutide. So there's a lot of people who take it and they notice like towards the end of that week, they're just the drug is kind of winding down in their system a little bit more. And so they give themselves a little bump. It just, if you think about it this way, like taking a medicine, there's peaks and then there's troughs. As you take it, it builds up to the blood concentration, then it goes down, and you're moving up slowly as you titrate up. But if you microdose or split your dose throughout the week, you're not going as high, but then you're also not going as low. So you're getting a more steady wave of blood concentration than these huge peaks.
And if you're like me, you're getting more and more tired towards the end of the week. And so it's a bad time to have your drug wear off.
For sure. When you're tired, it's harder to make good decisions.
And you're headed towards like more social events at the end of the week sometimes and more food decisions.
Ray just did a new prescription to downsize his Manjaro dose to 10 milligrams. So far, no weight gain or high sugars. That's great, awesome. Ray. That's great. Glad to hear that. Chicago Steve, 69, loves his Hume Smart Scale.
Yeah, somebody was thanking you for a recommendation earlier in the chat about adding vitamin B to their compound, I'm assuming. And that was going well, I think they said. Yeah. SRT Hopeful. Dave, thanks for the compound tirzepatide and B12 info. Maybe they went back to glycine.
Oh yeah. Switched. I didn't see this comment, but yeah, we shared a video on Lilly. Lilly actually published some information to go with their warning about the combination of B12 and tirzepatide. I'm not in the camp that this is a nothing burger and Lilly trying to scare everybody. Sure, they want to scare people away from compound tirzepatide. Of course, I mean, that's an easy take. But actually, if you look at the study here, what they're finding is not something that we should just ignore. What they're finding is that when tirzepatide and B12 specifically are combined, they form a new molecule. They actually form together. They're not just side by side in the vial. They actually combine and form a new molecule that could bind differently to your receptors, or it could ultimately long-term cause a potential issue with some sort of an immune reaction. And so these are things that we should be aware of. So for me personally, if I was going to take a compound, I would not choose something that was B12. That would be me. I know a lot of people are like, this is just Lilly trying to scare you away from compounds.
It's hard to believe sometimes that their bottom line is also in alignment with the truth. It's hard.
Yeah.
But it can happen.
Yeah. And my question is like, well, how long have we known this? That's what I would like to know. How long has this been, something that they're aware of, because hopefully it wasn't information they sat on, knowing that this was a likelihood. And what is the likelihood of other molecules like glycine or NAD or B2 or any of these other, because your compound, when they mix it with something else, if you're not getting B12, chances are you're getting it mixed with something else. So, B12 is probably the easiest target because I think that's the most common, but yeah, I think it's something that we need to watch on, and we're going to keep our fingers on the pulse of that, because I think it is something to pay attention to. Sherry had a question. I'm seeing my doc in a week and I'm on Medicare. I want to bring up the bridge plan starting soon. I just got to maintenance. Any advice you can give me, I would appreciate. Great, Sherry. Yeah. So the bridge plan, which is the plan that starts January 1st. So first of all, if you don't know what Sherry's talking about at all, and you're of Medicare age, the first thing you need to do is jump over to obesity.news. That's going to be our Substack or our newsletter, our email newsletter. So if you all do emails, go to obesity.news and sign up for our emails. One of the more recent articles that we did within the last couple of weeks was a update. In fact, I think it was just retweeted by the Obesity Society or something on Twitter today. But the new program to allow folks who are on Medicare who need GLPs for obesity is starting in July, and it's called the Bridge Program. The Bridge Program takes us to the end of the year, and then a new program called the Balance Program starts next year. So they're a little bit two different things, and it's important to understand the distinction between both of them. But Sherry wants to know about how she can talk to her doctor on Bridge. So the Bridge plan, which again will make these drugs available to patients for around $50 starting in July. If you're on Medicare Part D, you need to start that conversation with your doctor. It's the first thing you need to do, because your doctor is going to submit a prior authorization to this new central processing hub that Medicare is running during the period of the Bridge Program from July to the end of the year. And they're going to run all the prior authorizations that are going to allow you access to the medication. You're going to want your doctor to use your starting BMI. If you have comorbidities, to document those comorbidities that you have as well. And we've outlined what all of those are on our Substack article about Medicare and the Bridge and Balance program. So you're going to want to start that conversation. Have them use your starting weight would be my recommendation, because you're maintaining off of your starting weight that got you on the medication initially. They may change the guidance on that for maintenance, but there hasn't been any guidance issued on maintenance at all. It's just kind of what the BMI requirements are. So my recommendation would be to talk to your doctor about using your starting weight. That is the way that a lot of patients have had to maintain their access through their private insurance, is to just make sure that their doctor's including their starting weight in it. That doesn't mean that they can't include your current weight either, but just to demonstrate, the patient started at this, and so they're maintaining at this level right now, but they started here at, a BMI of 42 or whatever it may be. So that would be my recommendation for now. And as we get closer to the new year, the Balance program kicks in. You thought the Bridge was in April and Balance plan is January. So technically it starts in April, but it's not going to be rolled out effectively. Like everything that we've heard from HHS, everything that we've heard from the drug manufacturers is that meaningful coverage won't be universal until July 1st. It doesn't mean that you can't talk to your doctor about it now, because April was kind of the first target date that was bandied about, but July 1st really seems to be the date that everyone's rallied around, with that everybody should have access to this. So certainly you can talk to your doctor in April, but I'm not sure that you're going to be able to get that coverage until July 1st. Dave, since off GLP, have you considered trial from Fractal Health? So the trial from Fractal Health is already well underway. I don't know if they have any enrolling trials right now. What I am considering is the Allurian balloon, which is that's the little, we've had their CEO Shantanu Gore on a couple times, and that's going to be a little pill that you swallow that's attached to a little line, a little PICC line. And when you swallow the pill, they fill that pill with saline, and it becomes almost like, the best thing I can describe it, not to be crass, but it looks like a breast implant. It just sits in your stomach. Sits in there for 4 months, and patients lose, up to 15% of their body weight. And the interesting thing that Shantanu shared with us is that diabetics tend to actually lose more weight than non-diabetics for some reason in this study. And so one of the interesting dynamics there, because with GLPs, it's obviously different. Any news on how the bridge plan will affect those of us who are on compound because you could not afford? It shouldn't affect you at all. I mean, your doctor should still have documentation of your weight, your starting weight, and should have documentation that you've been using tirzepatide or semaglutide to bring your BMI down to wherever you're at. And so needing that medication to maintain shouldn't matter whether you are on a compounded version or a branded version of the medication. So the main thing is that conversation has to start with your doctor during this bridge phase here in 2026. So talk to your doctor about it and make sure your doctor knows that they have to submit the claim to the central processing. And we're going to have all of that information as it comes online. We're going to have it all at obesity.news. So tell your doctor they need to subscribe to On the Pen, to our Substack at obesity.news. It's really easy to remember. We've made that easy by design for you, just obesity.news. And we have covered this probably more thoroughly than just about anybody on the internet in terms of staying on top of these changes as they come. And so I intend fully on continuing that for those of you who are on Medicare, because I know what a big deal this is for you. Sherry says, thank you, and you're very welcome. Just a reminder for all those that are paying out of pocket for meds, please remember to submit receipts when doing taxes. There is a calculation for a deduction. Beautiful thing. Great advice, Nancy, says Sue the Dude, and I agree. We're 36 minutes into this live stream. So the other topic that I wanted to talk about was the $14 Ozempic. So now we've seen Ozempic launch in India in the generic form, and it's sort of validation from some of the reporting that we've heard here in the United States that these medications can be made for as low as like $3 a month. Now, here's something interesting that I think is interesting for you all to know. So when the pill came out, quick poll in the chat. When the pill came out, did you expect that the pill was going to be cheaper because it was cheaper to manufacture? I'm curious to know what your thoughts are in the chat. Did you think the pill was going to be cheaper or more expensive to manufacture? And I'll get into why that is, or what the surprising answer is actually to that. So $14 for a monthly dose of not compound, but generic semaglutide. Which is crazy. It's crazy that people will be able to get it that cheap. Now, it's not going to be easy or even legal for folks in the United States to get these from India. If this was Canada, it'd be a different story. We're hoping that generics could come online in Canada within the next year or so. Some people think it's going to happen much sooner. I don't know exactly. I know that there's a lot of stuff happening to try to keep that from being the case there in Canada, but India is a different story. These are not going to be easily accessible to people in the United States. But I think it does underscore the fact that, this drug can be made very cheap, very cheap. So when we're talking about paying $500 a month for it, even here in the United States, when these generic versions are approved in India at $14 a month, and they're still making money. That's the crazy thing, is they're selling it for $14 a month and still making money. So everyone says it's pretty much unanimous. Everyone says yes, they thought that the pills should be cheaper, and the pills were cheaper. But get this, when you consider the active pharmaceutical ingredient of the pills, semaglutide at the highest dose of 25 milligrams in the pill form is using 175 milligrams of
it's using a lot more
of peptide once per week
to make it
so
your gut, right?
Each week. So each week you are consuming 175 milligrams of semaglutide if you're taking it orally. Now your body's not absorbing that, is absorbing less than 1% of that. But if you're taking the injection, 2.4 milligrams of Wegovy, you are literally taking a very tiny fraction of the active pharmaceutical ingredient. So while the injections of semaglutide can be made for less than $5 a month, The pills, their cost is around $50. $50 a month. This is something that I saw shared by our friend Jen over on Twitter this week. But 50 times more, or $50 versus $5. So 10 times more expensive when you consider the cost of the active pharmaceutical ingredient. Now, surely there are other things involved. The cold storage being one of them. They're more complicated, but the actual manufacturing, it's using so much more raw active pharmaceutical ingredient. It begs the question long term for the stability and sustainability of peptides in oral form, unless they can come up with something, far better than the snack technology, where you can actually take a dose orally closer to what you take weekly, like 2.4 milligrams weekly injectable, and not 10 times that amount every day to have it be effective in the pill form. And so there is a lot of and the sad part is that 25 milligrams of semaglutide that goes into one pill a day, you are literally 99% of that is getting wasted. It's just getting eaten up by your stomach acid. So it's an interesting thing to consider when you talk about how much cheaper the orals are to make, and at least in the peptide form, they're actually more expensive when it comes to the active pharmaceutical ingredient. So very interesting to think about. You did a story years ago about $5 per month manufacturing costs for these drugs. Yeah, I think is around $3 or $5 or something. Yeah, that's Wood Cookies going into the deep tracks on that one, because that was a story that we covered a long time ago. I mean, it's so interesting. One of the most interesting things that I find, and then I'll kick it over to Hambone for some of the stuff she wants to cover today. One of the most interesting things for me in this whole journey sharing about this stuff is like the media is talking today about things that we've been talking about for years here. I mean, it's wild. Like the media is starting to care about things like obesity patients getting placebos in the clinical trials. They're starting to care about, the manufacturing costs of these drugs. I mean, they cared a while ago. That wasn't my story that I did, but originally it was a story that I shared. But to think like these stories that we've been covering and bringing to the community for almost 4 years here at On the Pen are now like deemed appropriate by the mainstream media to cover. I think it's just, we've been so ahead of the curve that I think it almost has hurt us in some ways, because now there's a lot of people sharing the news about this stuff. And so to be the first is not an easy place to be, because you're like, wait, I already said that. Wait, I've been saying that for years. And you don't ever get credit for it. But it's just one of those weird observations that I've had of kind of like trailblazing this new genre of obesity medicine news. So, and you've all been here for it, and I appreciate that. So take a moment. If you've enjoyed the stream so far, hit the thumbs up button. If you're not subscribed, please consider hitting the subscribe button down below, and then the bell will notify you every time that we go live here. And we go live, as you can see, every Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 12 p.m. Eastern. So that's why you're catching us here today. We took a little sabbatical for the spring break week, and now we're back. And so glad to have you back and glad to be back with you all. So what do you got, Hambone?
Yeah,
Prison Mike. The Dementoids, they come down and they suck the soul out of your body, and it hoits. And it hoits. Has anybody watched The Office? Anna's got the Prison Mike vibe going today.
I do.
I love it.
Although when my hair,
Do you really expect me not to throw you up against the wall, biatch?
I hope you guys are understanding this.
No, this is just how I talk to Ann when the cameras are off.
Yeah. Big brother energy.
This is basically what Ann and I do about 90% of the time when the cameras are off, is just random quotes from The Office. Yeah, Michael Scott.
Pretty much.
I digress.
Yeah. Well, my other thing about my outfit today is that when my hair was lighter, anytime I tried to wear a bandana, I felt like I looked like that. What's the Bret Michaels? He had like I didn't grow up with that music, but he had like one of the first dating reality TV shows, and it was horrible. But I felt like every time I would put one on, I looked like Bret Michaels, so I couldn't wear it. Anyway, one thing that came up first in my mind when you mentioned India, though, was I was wondering if the Indian government was subsidizing, because I feel like it's an incredible strategic decision for any country, especially if they're trying, they have a lot of catching up to do to other countries to make their population more healthy. And and I feel like, wasn't there some similar news out of China about lower prices or subsidizing? I can't
Sounds
quite recall,
familiar.
but there isn't anything that says that their government is explicitly subsidizing. But obviously it's the price collapse is driven by domestic generic competition. And anyway, so I thought that that's such a fascinating topic to me, because it's even beyond health. It's like your strategy for an entire country health wise. It's huge. It's so interesting. But I don't have a ton, but some of the things that I'm always trying to look for are ways to not spend more money on supplementing and all the different things that you can get advertisements for 10 times a day. Because I'm like, my algorithm is 20 different new supplements or regimens or whatever. And so I love to look at the innovations in food and just realizing what we have naturally in the food that we're already buying, like broccoli. I don't know if you guys have heard of sulforaphane. It's a potent antioxidant, and it's known to, in studies, show that it will fight the growth of cancerous cells. And it's even more potent in broccoli sprouts, and sprouts are incredibly easy to make home in a jar. But
do they extract this as a supplement?
They do, which is very expensive. So if you just buy broccoli and you chop it up and then you just let it sit for 30 minutes, an hour, or put it back in the fridge. You prepped it in the morning, you're going to eat it for dinner. That sulforaphane will develop and become more potent over that period of time. And so that's a really great way to get a boost in antioxidants from the food you're probably already eating, but you're just cutting it up right before you cook it. So some of that food prepping, there's even more benefit to. There's a similar thing with garlic. I don't know if you've seen the thing where you can cut garlic a million different ways and it'll taste different every way that you cut it.
I never knew that.
Yeah, it'll be strong.
And I worked for the Olive Garden.
You did. And there was
I know everything there is to know about garlic. Garlic used to come out of my pores. Maybe for about 10 years after I worked there, I would just randomly get a garlic whiff from my pores.
Yes. So the different forms in which you just prepare your garlic will significantly change the taste. But part of that is because it's full of enzymes. I'm not sure if I know how to pronounce that enzyme. It's allicin, ALLICIN. But basically, if you crush or chop your garlic and then give it about 10 minutes, it will not only change the flavoring, but it will become, it will produce that allicin. I'm sorry if I'm butchering that, or allinase. And that will, I was trying to remember what that did, but it there's a lot of benefits to that. I think one of them is like antibacterial.
I've heard that about garlic. Yeah.
And then also I think the heating it up once it's chopped or crushed also releases more enzymes. So
it's probably better if you microwave it, right?
Everything's better if you microwave it and you change the molecular structure so that your body doesn't recognize it as food anymore.
The other option would have been to go back in time 10 years and just rub your bread on my skin.
Rub your bread?
Yeah. Wherever or whatever you want to garlic
like
on. Just rub it up
bread?
against me and you'd get my residual allicin.
Okay.
I digress.
Okay. There were a few more that I haven't spent as much time on. Well, okay, I lie. There are some. So one of the big ones is I love carbohydrates, and I have an argument with my husband just about every month that my body, I know it just deals better with carbohydrates than his. I need more carbohydrates, and he laughs at me, but I think it's scientific anyway. But your carbohydrates, So like a big thing, oats, people are always arguing back and forth. Oats are really filling, or studies will say if you eat oats in the morning, it spikes your blood glucose and you're more hungry throughout the day. And so there's a lot of arguments about that. But many carbohydrates, if you prepare them and then you freeze them or you refrigerate them overnight, they have become a slow carb in that process. And you can do that with oats. You can do it with potatoes. You can even do it with rice and pasta.
I've heard this before.
So if you,
especially like white rice.
Yeah.
You cook it the day before, you put it in the fridge, and then you reheat it the next day, and it's fewer carbs, less insulin, or less blood sugar.
And it's a slower carb. And I think a lot is happening with the starches in that sitting process. So I often will put a lot of potatoes or sweet potatoes in the oven, and I'll just bake a bunch of them low and slow for a long time. And then I'll chop them up into portions, throw them in my freezer, and then I'll pull them out as a side dish for the meal, stick it in the air fryer with my chicken or whatever.
Beautiful.
Yeah. And so, and then I'm also not as worried about some of those issues. Okay. Last one's really weird, really random. If you put your mushrooms in the sun, now this one sounds the most hokey, like a crystal or something. But what happens is there's this whole science, which I think in the future we'll pay more attention to in farming. But if you pick your foods at a certain time of the day, so it's relative to sunlight and what's happening in the plant at the moment, it's more nutritious. But for mushrooms, it can produce vitamin D. So basically, if you've got a sunny window and you set your mushrooms in the sunny window before you prepare them, they will produce, it's just 15 to 30 minutes, more vitamin D. And let's see, and cooking it, it converts it to ergosterol. You're so much better at pronouncing these words.
You just got to do it confidently. That's all.
You're just a lot more.
That's ergosterol.
You know,
what we learned about in third grade, I think.
So that turns into vitamin D.
Or you can microwave it.
Just as
same thing. It's just the heat. It's the heat from the sun. It's the heat from the microwave. Same thing. Vitamin D.
Oh, so it's just like your skin, you know. So it's that.
Oh, sure, yeah. Your skin gets sunlight, produces. It's the only vitamin that the body makes, right?
Yeah.
Vitamin D. Yeah. Which is also something that if you're type 2 diabetic, you are likely deficient in. If you live in the Midwest and you go through the wintertime, you're likely deficient in. So put your shrooms in the sun before you pick them. Or if you're in Michael Clanton's space, psilocybin mushrooms are best picked in the AM, he says. So good luck with that, Michael.
Those people, they get real serious about what they're doing, and they get ahead of a lot of other industries. And here I am drinking coffee, and something really important is that coffee and chocolate are like the #1 source of polyphenols in America. But the problem is that the way that in which they process coffee beans and cacao beans, a lot of times is a process that involves like the fermentation of the outer parts of that plant. And in that process, a lot of mold can be produced.
I was just going to say, I feel like I remember reading years ago about the process with which coffee is harvested and then held is really lends itself to a lot of mold growing. And
many years ago, I read Dave Asprey's Bulletproof book.
Maybe that's where it was from.
He's a goofy guy, but he's got a couple of things that are deeply scientific. And he had an insane amount of exposure to mold, which you get more sensitive to mold as you're exposed. And so he was trying to eliminate all mold in his diet, but he's obsessed with coffee. So my husband and I, we buy coffee that is not necessarily the best tasting, but it is
because it doesn't have the mold.
Extremely high standards for mold testing. A lot of times just European chocolates and coffees already have that because they have higher standards. So something to consider because your coffee is, something you rely on, that you should maybe let yourself spend a little, like $1 or $2 more to get something a little safer.
There you go. Makes sense. And then that's a whole nother rabbit trail of mold exposure and what that can do. A lot of the stuff you like to get into is reminds me of a lot of the stuff that Dr. Tina gets into. on her podcast.
Well, and something very correlated to obesity is mold exposure.
Really?
You lose a lot of. There's just so many negative effects of mold, from cognition to metabolic issues. It's a rabbit hole.
Interesting. So maybe, just maybe my obesity is because of some sort of
we
fungus.
Lived in a lot of funky houses.
We did live in, well, we live in the Midwest where, one out of every probably 3 houses, the basement floods every time it rains. And our houses were no different growing up.
Because of tornadoes.
Yep. If you live in the Midwest, I want to jump back. Thanks for sharing that stuff, Hambone. I want to jump back because there's a guy named Mark in the comment, Mark Suave, 25, who says, for my weight, 3,200 calories should have you in a huge deficit. Trust me, I get you've tried everything. Me too. But counting calories is our burden to bear. I don't know if you missed that part of it. I've been tracking my calories meticulously. My average calories are around 2,500 a day, and that's before I subtract anything for the workouts that I've been doing. And I've been burning about 500 to 1,000 calories 4 times a week with that. So it's not that simple for everyone. May have worked for you. I always say if you were able to control your weight and get your weight down, if you have the disease of obesity and you're able to manage your weight effectively, that doesn't make you an expert in weight loss. It actually makes you an expert in yourself. Yeah. You figured yourself out. There's nothing and that's really great for you, Mark, that you're able to figure that out. But for those of you who have tried calorie deficits for extended periods of time, even though most calorie deficits are not sustainable. Like I was telling my friend Ike today, I was like, listen, I can go down to 1,600 calories a day and I would lose weight, but I would feel miserable. I'm 40 years old. We never know how much time that we have left. And I don't want to show up to my kids' stuff. I don't want to show up to anything just feeling like garbage all the time.
And that can't be good. There's always a trade-off. Yeah. There's a reason you're not feeling good.
Yeah. 1,600 calories. Could I get my weight down doing that? Probably. I'm pretty confident that I do, but do you use the food scale? I worked in the food service industry for the first 20 years of my working life, including a lot of kitchen management. I'm probably a lot more adept at figuring out weights and measurements than just about anybody.
You were the first one I ever knew that was like portioning with a scale. I think it was the first time I ever heard about that.
Yeah. So, have I been portioning everything out with a scale for the last few months? No, I haven't. But primarily my macros are coming from protein. I think if you're critiquing my macros, I think what you would critique is probably the fat intake. And that's because I think I'm hardwired when I increase my protein intake, I'm always trying to get that from natural stuff. And my inclination is to eat ground beef. So probably my fat intake is a little bit higher, but at the end of the day, I don't think that 90% of the people have to get that granular with it. Honestly, they just cut their calories back. Sometimes people do something as simple as they cut out beer. I cut out alcohol a year ago. And I was drinking probably, a couple thousand calories worth of alcohol in a week, cut that out. Over the last year, did it move my weight? Yeah, but eventually the weight's, come back, even though the alcohol is still cut out. So it's just complicated. It's so much more complicated than I think we want it to be, which I think is why this can be so frustrating. But, I'm trying to continue to share despite the fact that there's a lot of armchair experts out there.
For some people, it's not that complicated. And I empathize with why it's difficult to understand that there is more complexity for other people. And when you have been using a scale and you have been learning portion size and you're eating similar foods on the regular, you get to a point where you know how much, you don't, at least I do. I used a scale for a couple of weeks to kind of reset my portioning.
Sure.
And now I'm like, okay, I know how much a cup of this is or whatever.
Yeah. So anyways, I really wish that my
camera troubles.
Yeah.
Camera troubles.
I wonder if this thing is still under warranty, because honestly, it's quite frustrating that it can't
I know
hang.
what I'll be doing the rest of the week.
Camera figuring out. All right.
Testing other gear online.
Yeah, and then all of our Velcro stuff's falling off the walls too. So
our pets' heads are falling off.
Heads are falling off. There's another deep track. So yeah, anyways, that's the update today. We've got a podcast coming tomorrow. Thank you all for hanging out and sharing today. I appreciate each and every one of you for spending your time with us today. It's been fun. If you missed last Friday's panel that was done here on the pen, there was a great conversation about movement and learning to love movement while you're on a GLP-1 journey with our friend Mike on a Mission and his buddy Zach. They had a couple of experts. Jamie Selsler was part of that crew as well. And they had a great conversation on Friday that can be found here at On the Pen. And if you're a podcast listener, you can also find them on the podcast platforms. I think weighing what, sorry, that was Sabrina's. Theirs is called Weight and Measure. So if you look up weight & measure, wherever you get your podcast, you can listen to that, but you can also watch the video here at On the Pen. So thank you for being here. Look out for the podcast tomorrow, and we're going to hype the crap out of it, right? We're going to hype that podcast tomorrow. Somebody last week said, "You're so selfish asking me for all my hypes every week." And I was like, you know what, lady, just keep your hypes. All right. I don't want your hypes.
But we would really appreciate
No, you know what? You do have to. You do have to. That's a prerequisite for being here. I demand all your hypes.
I deserve them.
I demand the hypes, and I demand them now. I have spoken. All right. That's what we got. Thank you for hanging out with me, and thank you for being the best part of what we do. And we'll catch you tomorrow on the podcast. Thanks for hanging out, friends.
See ya.